But here's the key. Here's the thing that people miss. Don't worry about time. That's really crucial. Just remember, you can start and finish your book at any time in the story of the book you're writing. I don't mean your personal time writing the book. I mean the narrative. So take, for example, a very famous story, Star Wars. And we'll take George Lucas writing his 9 chapters of the Star Wars saga. And remember, he didn't write those as books. They weren't grand things. He wrote them as outlines or treatises or for films, treatments for films even. Okay? See, I'm not perfect. I don't get my English right all the time. We're always practicing. So in his treatments for these movies, he's written 9 chapters. And so treatment number 4 was A New Hope. And then treatment number 5 was The Empire Strikes Back. And number 6 was Return of the Jedi, or in its original form, The Revenge of the Jedi. Until the fans said the Jedi would never engage in revenge because that's not who they are. Well, so by taking the 3 middle stories, he's deciding where it's going to start and where it's going to end, because the start and end of those stories suits the stories better. He could have started it somewhere in the 3rd treatment or somewhere in the 7th treatment, but he chose the middle 3 because he felt those were the best 3. So you may have a story somewhere in your world where you can just put brackets round a story in the middle there, or at the beginning, and then finish it halfway through, and then start it again for a second book halfway through, and then to the end. It just depends how clever you're being with that time. So, using the example of my book right now, and we're talking work in progress, remember, so I'm not an established author, only a non-fiction author with my Jackson Rocco digital format book on Amazon. What we are talking about is a structure that I'm using for a 20-year period. And I've chosen to start it at the beginning of a relationship, and the relationship will end about a third of the way through the book, and then the next third of the book will dwell on how this person is coping with the end of that relationship, and then the last third of the book will bring in a new story which reflects on the previous 2/3. So there is that structure, there's that time. Now, you could say the last third of what I've added is almost like an epilogue, and I think it works like that. It would be an epilogue, except for the fact that it doesn't just kind of add to the story like an addendum or a caveat or some kind of open-ended feature. It's actually more relevant that it actually mirrors a lot of the stuff that's happened, and it kind of opens it out a little bit more, and it also gives it the ending that I want. Now, within that structure, as I've spoken before, within this story that I'm writing, I'm adding chapters where the person is talking to a counsellor. And so in those counselling sessions, the character is revealing more about the story and asking the counsellor to listen to the story, having written a book about the story, and is bringing pages to the counsellor and asking them to read what the person, Jackson Rocco, went through as a form of testimony, validation, and also he says in the story, this is my homework and I'd like you to mark my homework. It's kind of like self-therapy. So within this structure of chapters is a counselling session for one chapter, and then part of the actual story that Jackson's written, which details what he went through. And for the next 2 or 3 chapters, we're going to focus on that particular romance. And then back to a counselling session, then back to the romance. So here we have what the genre is. We're dealing with romantic fiction. We're also dealing with a modern take on it. Maybe some magic realism. I don't know. Hopefully that will come through. Hopefully some metafiction. Sort of a postmodern look at things. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but it will be self-evident in the writing. A lot of this sounds a bit pompous at the moment, and a lot of it highfalutin, but I have the structure. So, getting back to getting on with the writing, I have fleshed out at least 20 to 30 chapters that I know I'm going to write. And I know that one of them will be a counselling session, and I know that 3 of them will be about a romantic affair, and then on it goes. I know how the romance goes because I have mostly lived it in real life, so I'm using some true to life elements, and I'm going to be changing a few names and a few situations here and there. It's not going to be detailed in some areas, it's going to be more detailed in others. And I'm going to use the story to evoke and epitomize the way men and women can relate to each other. And my hands will be tied slightly by the fact that the narrative will be written by a singular man. So they will be talking about their counselling sessions, and they will be talking in the voice of an author. So hopefully that gives a couple of spins and perspectives. Not only that, the author will be presenting verses, which are poems and songs, and some declarations of love. And so the story has a bit of, a little bit of daring do in it, a little bit of risk. And one of the challenges for me, and one of the reasons why I'm inspired to write this and talk about it here, is that the book will be about a great romance and possibly inspire people to believe in love and look at love in a different way, while hopefully offering some fresh perspectives and turning everything on its head. I mean, without giving too much away, I don't really want to spoil the ending of the actual narrative for future readers. All I want to do is go through the process of writing the book, talk about my characterizations and the way I'm writing and what I'm into week by week. So this is week 1, and I am on chapter 3. I've written the first chapter, which is a counselling session, and then the second chapter is the 2 characters meeting, the 2 romantic characters meeting, and the third chapter is more in-depth date situation with those 2 characters and describing how they are getting on with each other and how they are falling for each other, but only, of course, from that one perspective of the male character, Jackson. And so Jackson has met Helena Fuchs and already talked to his counsellor. And the idea is that when we come to the present day, or near enough the present day, and we find Jackson talking to his counsellor, he will be asking his counsellor to read his book and read the story up until we, the readers, will be reading it. So we are up to speed on his therapy of that moment or counselling at that moment, and up to speed of his writing. And we'll be looking at the way the counsellor reacts to all of that, and maybe that reflects the way a reader reads it, but I'm not going to get into that. That's a totally different world. My point is, with that rhythm I've got, and I'm happy with that strategy, I can then proceed and get this thing done, because I think that is novel enough to make it interesting. I'm sure there have been other books about therapy sessions, and there've been a lot of dramas on TV about therapy sessions. This is slightly different. The character is coming in not for therapy. They're coming in with different motives. For a start, he sees the writing he's done as homework and self-therapy. He believes that he's already done the work, but he also believes that he still needs help in some way, because he's not quite sure of how far he's got with it all. So we've got these questions lined up to answer in the book, which hopefully we'll answer later on. So I've got to keep tabs of all this. I've got to keep tabs of the way the characters are feeling, and I've got to keep tabs of the structure. So every time I'm thinking of things that I'm talking to you about, I'm thinking, wow, okay, things are spinning off in my head, and I think I've got to go and write that down now, because that's giving me fresh ideas. But or not, it doesn't matter. The point is that tomorrow I'll be looking at chapter 3 with my map, and I will be finishing that chapter.